Okay, I must admit, we've had numerous phone-ins over the last couple of weeks where people have actually stated that, you know, the people that are running the country are barristers, and I'm guessing that they're in the ring that you talk of.
Well, this is interesting, Ian, because yes, running the country, right? But because of the blueprint that I'm talking about, the web, which each level is a mirror of the top level, it works in the same way. That's why the lawyers are running the Isle of Wight and the appointed people. As we know, the appointed people and the lawyers run the government, and also the shadow people behind them who they're answerable to.
Okay, we've got emails coming in. I don't know whether you want to answer questions or not, but we'll put them to you between now and 12. Okay. Just something else that I mean, there was two things that I looked at yesterday, and they just both stuck out. And because I thought I was going mad back in about 1997, 98. When
you leave that to me, mate. Leave that to me.
When this 2-page article appeared in the News of the World. And I was on duty at another radio station doing the breakfast show, reading this, couldn't believe the story. But come Monday, when our news team had got back to work and investigated it, everything had been shut down. There was no story to answer. And yet, I know damn well that I saw a 2-page article, and I've mentioned it to numerous people over the years. What the hell happened? We're talking sacrifices in Ryde. Right. We're talking babies.
I'll tell you the story, mate, because I've mentioned this a number of times over the years. By the time it came out in the News of the World, I'd already investigated this enough to recognize absolutely every element that they were talking about. It was based on interviews with what they called a community worker. Again, these people are terrified of saying who it is. I don't give a damn, frankly. You know, I'm not frightened of these bloody people. They're pathetic. But a lot of people who've seen what they can do are. And so the article said that the Isle of Wight was controlled by a network of Satanists. True. And of course, when you sacrifice children, you need to get hold of children. And it talked about the fact that there were people, and I'd come across this term all over the world. There were women in captivity on the Isle of Wight that people didn't know about, kept in basements and prisons, imprisonment basically. And they're known all over the world, and this is what was mentioned in this article, as breeders. And what they do is they continually impregnate these women, and either they give birth to a child which never ever sees the light of day in terms of the system. Therefore, when they sacrifice it, no one knows it's existed, so no one's going to say what's happened to this child. Or they abort the, I mean, it's horrible, but we've got to face this if we're going to sort this out. They abort the child, and they do rituals with the fetus. And what this community worker was saying, and I'm not casting aspersions on Arcadia in Ryde, that's not the point of this. It's a building and it's an amusement arcade. It was just said that this was used by those people because children, waifs and strays who've left home tended to end up there. So they would go in there and they would befriend them, and I'll come back, I'll give you a meal, all the rest of it, and then they would never be seen again. One of the places they used to take them, according to this News of the World article, was a place called the Roundhouse in George Street. Not saying for a second that anyone to do with the Roundhouse now was involved. We're talking years and years ago. But this is what was in the article.
Sure.
And they quoted a policeman, a guy called Kingman, I think his name was, on the island, who was quoted in the article as saying, I've talked to this lady and others, and there is no reason for me not to believe that what they're saying is true. And the reason, Ian, that when you got to work on the Monday, it was all shut down, because that's how it happens. The ring moves in and they shut everything down, and only those people that read it or kept it anymore have access to it. Although I think if you go on the internet, you can still find the article here and there, because the web's so massive they can't always take everything down. But that article you talk about was classic of how it works, not just on the Isle of Wight, mind, but in every single community. And on the Isle of Wight, it's particularly relevant because of the size of the population. So the ratio of these people to the population is much, much higher than you'll find in Portsmouth or Reading or anywhere else.
So I didn't go mad then. I didn't dream
No,
it, and
it
because my bosses thought that because gave them the story, and all of a sudden the paper disappeared. There was no record of it whatsoever.
Oh, I saw it, man, and I've mentioned it actually in this article on my website, Isle of Wight, a nice place, shame about the cesspit. I mention it in there.
So how did it get into the paper in the first place? I mean, obviously, you know, I mean, if this thing is so powerful, then I mean, we're talking a 2-page spread. You can't keep that a secret. They must have known it was going to be in the paper.
Well, I've worked in the media. You worked in the media. Things get through, and when something like 9/11 happens, this manufactured problem to justify the solution of invading Afghanistan and the war on terror and taking our freedoms away. If you want to find out key information that is no longer part of the official story, but mainstream journalists were reporting at that time, you have to go right back as close to the story breaking as possible. Because when the story breaks, then the lid's not down yet, or not as much down as they can put it, and stuff gets out. And that's why later stuff that was reported at the time is contradicted by the official story. And then once the system moves in, then they start closing it down. For instance, there was a guy who did an interview on live on an American television station, telling a story about the plane crash of JFK Jr., which indicated very strongly, because he witnessed it, he was at the airport, that actually a bomb had blown that plane up. And when the recording of that was produced, that bit where he talked about that disappeared. This is how they do it. But in terms of, sometimes you'll get articles that get through, and then when they get through, that's when the lid's put on them. But also, this stuff, and I'm sure there'll be people listening to this shaking his head. See, he is mad, I told you. Because it's so fantastic compared with the world that people think they live in, that it's like too much for many people to actually just literally compute and think it's possible. Not only is it possible, it's happening on a vast scale. It's like the corruption in the council. The number of stories that I've been told by people who've witnessed corruption with our money. For instance, you'll get someone from the ring will have, say, a piece of artwork. Maybe it's worth 10 grand. He, in league with the ring people in the council, then has it corruptly valued at £50,000. The ring in the council then accept the corrupt valuation. Our money, 50 grand, goes to the guy with an artwork worth 10 grand. He gets his 10 grand plus a bonus, and the rest is shared out by the people who've sanctioned it. The other way they do it is by undervaluing council property, selling it to people at well less than market value. The guy then sells it on at market value, and the profits are shared out. Again, this island is so freaking corrupt. It's unbelievable for a place of, 23 by 13? Staggering. And the reason it is the drugs. Because think about it, Ian, you've got all this coastline, particularly down the south of the island, because Black Gang China and all that stuff, it wasn't just contraband booze, hundreds of years ago. We're talking it's still going on, and now it's drugs. So once they've landed the stuff on the Isle of Wight, where are the sniffer dogs and the customs on the Isle of Wight ferries? Once they've got it on the island, it's on the mainland. And it's couriered over there in lorries, which are ostensibly carrying other goods by individual couriers. It's flown in and out of the island, this stuff. I mean, one guy who was a former drug officer in the Metropolitan Police Drug Squad, who's now in private work, he estimates that something like £500 million worth of drugs pass through the Isle of Wight every year. And one of the two ways they do it, there are many ways because there's a lot of drugs to move. They will bring it in at night in boats, and they'll drop lobster pots into the sea.
There were some stories about that earlier this year.
And then the next morning, someone goes out, seemingly to get lobster, and they pull the drugs up. Another thing they do is a boat will come in at night, and they'll drop drugs in something that is would float. but they cover it in a substance that makes it sink. But it's a substance which, as the water moves, gets worn away. And so they drop the stuff, it sinks. They then, are on their toes away in their boat, miles and nowhere to be seen by the time this stuff wears away and comes to the surface. And then someone else goes out and picks it up. They have so many different ways. And of course, once you're dealing with vast amounts of drugs, you also have enormous amounts of money you need to launder. And this island is full of properties and other things, businesses, that appear on the legal documents to be owned by Fred Bloggs or Charlie Jones, that are actually just paper people for drug money laundering. And it's interesting. Maybe you could explain this to me. I don't know. When I first came to the island, and
I probably won't.
And every time since, when I first came to the island in 1982, I looked around at the island economy, which was many times struggling. I look at some of the many of the houses and stuff like that. I worked in television. I was earning a good wage for the BBC for that time anyway. I couldn't afford them. And I thought, where does all the money come from to create all this stuff? And then you meet people, sometimes the brother or sister of someone that close, and they say, I don't understand how my brother has got this flash bloody sports car and lives in this big house. He'd never get that from the job he does, or sometimes he's got no visible means of support. Well, I think I can help you there now. I reckon if they put sniffer dogs on the Isle of Wight ferries, much of the island economy would collapse in a very short time, to be honest. And then it comes down to this. If I can uncover this, why can't the police? You get the odd, drug bust and all the rest of it, but compared with the drugs passing through this place, the number of drug busts are pathetic. So what's going on? Because if you, and I've talked to genuine policemen on the Isle of Wight, many old school policemen, decent people trying to serve rather than dictate. I've talked to decent old school social workers, and they are pulling their bloody hair out with frustration at the corruption they're seeing around them. And if you are going to take children, for instance, from loving parents, you have to have people in social services who are willing to do that. Also, if you're running drugs through the Isle of Wight on this scale, you have to have a police force, at least a significantly influential element of it, that is going to turn a blind eye. Otherwise, you're going to get rapped 2 or 3 times a week, aren't you? And there are families on the Isle of Wight in this Isle of Wight mafia network who have businesses of various kinds that are fronts for moving drugs or washing drug money, etc., etc.
I would imagine because you make some statements that are not liked by certain elements of the mafia. What sort of problems have you had with them? I mean, they must have
couldn't care less, mate. They're pathetic.
But they must give you a hard time.
I've seen more brains in a packet of faggots. They're stupid people. Obsessed with money, obsessed with causing harm to others, obsessed with having domination over others. I mean, they're a psychiatrist's life's bloody work, these people, but they're very dangerous.
Have you ever been threatened?
No. I tell you what, if they ever threaten me, I just run at them quicker, right? I'm not frightened of these people. Like I say, they're pathetic, and what we need to do is expose them. Now, I'm willing to do that, but I need more and more information. Isle of Wight Mafia, AOL.com. Absolutely strictest confidence. Let's sort these buggers out and get this island back to what it should be, which is a nice place to live and run by the people, not the cabal.
Should we take a quick break and come back?
Sure.
And we've got some emails and some
Your
stuff.
Your coffee's fantastic, by the way. Much better than Isle of Wight Radio.
Thank you. And we've got David Icke, who's in at the moment. Just to get light and fluffy, you're leaving the country. Not
as a result of this interview, by the way.
No.